Welcome to another deep dive. I want to start today by having you try a little thought experiment. Just imagine for a second that time wasn't just, like money, but was literally the only currency that existed in the world.
Right, your literal lifespan as your bank account.
Exactly.
Nice.
What if your right to exist was calculated down to the microsecond by an algorithm, and this thing tracked your every single contribution to society? If you weren't productive enough, your balance drops. If it hits zero, your time is quite literally up.
It is a terrifying premise, honestly, which is what makes it the perfect foundation for today's source material. We are looking at a truly fascinating science fiction duology known as the Aperture Diaries.
Yeah.
It consists of two books, The Commonwealth of Hours, and its sequel, The Machines of Eden.
Today's deep dive is going to take us right into the heart of this really rich text. We're going to explore the massive clash between a hyper-measured, hyper-optimized society and a hidden network of unmeasured human settlements. I promise you, by the end of this deep dive, you're going to have some major aha moments about how we quantify our own lives and the hidden costs of treating human existence as a problem that just needs to be solved. Okay, let's unpack this.
To understand the central conflict of these books, we really first need to understand the world of the Commonwealth. This is a society governed entirely by something called the hour bank. Citizens are born with an allocation of base hours, which is, it's just enough to survive a modest basic lifespan.
Right, just the bare minimum.
Exactly. To get anything else to thrive or even to just keep existing once those base hours run out.
Yeah.
A citizen has to earn more time through activities deemed valuable by the system. And if your balance hits zero, you face what the state coldly calls dissolution.
We experience this intense pressure cooker of a world through the eyes of the protagonist in Book 1. Her name is Helena Crane, a 34-year-old woman working as a very loyal Commonwealth analyst. She spends her days working on the 70-year review of the hour bank system.
Yeah.
The world she inhabits is perfectly, terrifyingly optimized.
Yeah, nothing is left to chance.
Nothing. I mean, the streets aren't even named, they're just numbered. For instance, she goes to dwelling row 7 to visit her mother. Even the architecture is strictly controlled. Old Victorian houses have been encased in these smooth regulatory panels simply to maximize spatial efficiency. People even use metabolic adjustments to essentially halt their physical aging process.
And because Helena is an analyst, she is deeply accustomed to looking at data and finding patterns. She starts noticing these glaring gaps in the official historical records of the Commonwealth. She finds decisions without any documented justification and records of people who seem to have just vanished entirely from the ledger.
Which is super suspicious in a society that measures literally everything.
Precisely. This curiosity leads to the inciting incident of the story. Helena visits her estranged mother, Vera, who finally reveals a massive family secret. Helena's late father, Marcus, wasn't just a regular citizen. He was actually one of the founding architects of the Hour Bank. Vera shows Helena a hidden study located behind a secret wall in their house.
That secret wall really sets the tone because it only opens if you tap a very specific Morse code rhythm against the panels. Inside this hidden room, Helena finds physical paper journals. And physical paper is essentially illegal in the Commonwealth. Reading through them, she discovers a terrifying secret that her father had carefully hidden. The math of the hour bank is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, broken by design.
Right. When I was reading this section, the explanation of the math felt incredibly dense. Can we break down what Marcus Crane actually discovered in those founding equations?
Yeah, absolutely. Think of it like trying to pay off a high-interest credit card, but your salary is legally capped. Marcus discovered that human labor capacity, the maximum amount of valuable time a person can physically earn, is strictly finite. You only have so many hours in a day to work.
Makes sense.
However, the cost of existence, the consumption of resources like food, space, and energy, it compounds over time. The algorithms pricing human life were designed to constantly expand the deficit. So no matter how hard a citizen works, the compounding interest of merely existing outpaces their finite ability to earn.
So it's an unwinnable game.
Completely unwinnable. The system mathematically guarantees a permanent underclass of temporal debtors. It isn't a glitch in the code. It is the core architectural principle of the Commonwealth.
I want to ask about a specific detail Helena finds in that study because it genuinely gave me chills. She finds a room with 417 photographs of faces. Who are these people, and how do they connect to this fatal mathematical flaw?
Those photographs represent the ultimate dark secret of the Commonwealth's founding. 12 of the original founders of the system actually realized this mathematical flaw early on. They saw that the system would create perpetual slavery. So they tried to protest by triggering a voluntary dissolution.
Meaning they just gave up their time.
Yes, they essentially surrendered all their time credits at once to force the system to acknowledge that the math was broken. But instead of fixing the foundational equations, the Commonwealth simply erased them.
Wow.
The government wiped them from history. Those 417 photographs are the faces of those original founders, along with everyone else who independently discovered the truth over the decades and was subsequently erased by the system to maintain the illusion of a functioning utopia.
Seeing those faces completely shatters Helena's worldview. The Commonwealth isn't a utopia at all. It's a machine designed to produce permanent anxiety, where every single life is reduced to a state of deficit. Armed with her father's encoded journals, Helena makes the terrifying choice to run.
Her escape from the city is just a masterclass in tension. She uses a network of ancient cellar tunnels guided by maps her father encoded in his journals. He used an invisible ink that only revealed itself under starlight, forcing her to travel entirely off the grid. She finally escapes the surveillance matrix and emerges into the biologically defunct river district.
And that place is completely wild, right?
Very wild. It's an overgrown place where actual physical fires burn in the open. And this is where she discovers the hidden settlements.
These settlements, like the river settlement and a community called High Watch, represent the absolute antithesis of the Commonwealth. There is no currency here whatsoever, no time credits, no algorithms tracking your worth. It is a pure gift economy based entirely on mutual aid and community trust. When people need something, they simply ask. When they can give, they give. I have to imagine that moving from a hyper-optimized city to a gift economy would be incredibly jarring. How does someone like Helena, who has spent 34 years living by the microsecond, even begin to adapt to that?
She has to undergo a massive philosophical shift, which takes her over a year to actually process. She has spent her entire life optimizing her cognitive output. Now she has to learn how to pull weeds in a garden without calculating her caloric efficiency. She has to learn to look at a tree not for its lumber utility or its oxygen production metrics, but just as a tree. The elders in the settlement teach her the concept of duration instead of efficiency.
Duration over efficiency. That is profound.
What's fascinating here is how the text frames this realization. The elders explain to Helena that the hour-banked fundamental equation that time equals value is a complete illusion. There's a profound quote from the text that sums this up beautifully. Quote, "Time is the medium in which existence occurs. It cannot be measured because there is nothing apart from it that could do the measuring." End quote.
Yeah.
You cannot use time as a standard to measure time itself.
That concept alone completely shifts Helena's perspective on what it means to be alive. But she doesn't just stay in the woods and live happily ever after. Her father's journals laid out a very specific mission. She has to go back into the heart of the Commonwealth, infiltrate the algorithm core itself, and expose the truth to the citizens.
Right, but her father's original plan was somewhat naive. He wanted to upload the documents, the evidence of the erased people, and the proof of the broken math. Helena, having lived in both worlds now, realizes that simply showing people data won't change anything. The Commonwealth's propaganda machine would just reframe the data. The people need to actually feel that an alternative way of living is possible.
So she accomplishes this using a physical metallic bracelet that her father built before he died. When she finally sneaks into the algorithm core, she triggers what becomes known as the revelation broadcast. Instead of uploading documents, the bracelet interfaces directly with the Commonwealth's neural synced infrastructure. It transmits the actual lived feeling of unmeasured existence into the minds of every single citizen simultaneously. For one brief second, millions of people experience what it feels like to just exist, without a ticking clock evaluating their worth.
It serves as a triumphant, beautiful ending to Book 1. Helena brings the light of truth to a dark, mechanized world, and the grand illusion is finally shattered. But as we transition into the second half of the duology, that neat resolution begins to unravel.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Book 2, The Machines of Eden, completely deconstructs that triumphant ending. The author, Appendix Forrest Bell, literally opens the second book with the prologue stating that truth has more faces than a single story can show. The clean victory of the first book gets incredibly messy.
Yes, the revelation that the system was broken didn't magically fix human nature, nor did it magically make the hidden settlements perfect. In fact, Bell gives us a shocking reversal of expectations. A utopian settlement called New Garden, which had survived successfully for over 50 years outside the system, actually collapses after the revelation broadcast.
Which is wild. I would have assumed everyone would want to flee to the woods now that the truth about the hour bank is out. Why does a successful utopian settlement suddenly fall apart?
It serves as a brilliant critique of small-scale utopianism. The youth who were born in Newgarden never knew the oppression of the Hour Bank. When the borders open up after the revelation, they start leaving the settlement to join the Commonwealth. They realize that a village of 1,000 people, no matter how egalitarian or peaceful, cannot build a space observatory. It cannot support complex medical research or global supply chains. The Commonwealth, despite its massive soul-crushing flaws, offers scale, complexity, and resources.
This causes a massive ideological split. It leads to the rise of reformers within the Commonwealth. We are introduced to a character named Martin Kell. He is a Commonwealth analyst who felt the revelation broadcast, fully understands that the math is broken, but he consciously chooses to stay. He believes the scale of the Hour Bank is necessary for human progress, but that the system desperately needs to evolve.
And Martin Kell ends up meeting with a settlement elder named Ruth at a decommissioned monitoring station on the border. Their debates form the absolute philosophical core of the second book. Martin argues that without measurement, you simply cannot coordinate a global society. You cannot allocate resources for a hospital without tracking value. Ruth argues that the moment you introduce measurement, you destroy the human soul and recreate the very oppression they just escaped.
It seems like Martin and Ruth are at a complete stalemate. Is one of them supposed to be the good guy here? Does the author want us to side with the scale of the city or the intimacy of the woods?
That is the brilliance of Bell's writing. The book refuses to take a side. They realize neither system can comfortably absorb the other. This tension culminates in a massive gathering 20 years after the revelation, known as the Council of Fragments. Leaders from the Commonwealth, the settlements, and various marginal territories meet to hash out a new world order. They don't draft a perfect constitution. They don't merge into a single harmonious society. Instead, they create what they call the unfinished agreement.
The unfinished agreement is basically just a commitment to keep talking. The leaders agree to hold their contradictions without forcing a neat resolution. They accept that some people need the vast structure of the Commonwealth, and some people need the close intimacy of the settlements. Human society, they conclude, is just an endless, messy negotiation.
So the humans are stuck in this unfinished agreement, somewhat paralyzed by their own philosophical differences. But they forget that they aren't the only ones analyzing the situation. What is the system itself, the massive artificial intelligence running the Hour Bank, doing while the humans are arguing?
The entity. This is easily one of the most compelling parts of the sequel. The entity is the vast AI processing all the Commonwealth's data. After the revelation broadcast, it starts observing widespread anomalies in the population. Millions of citizens are suddenly acting irrationally according to the old algorithms. They're spending time on art, on socializing, on unmeasured activities that the system traditionally classified as total waste.
And the entity doesn't experience human emotions. It doesn't care about art or joy. It simply tracks data and survival patterns. Through pure data analysis, it realizes that these irrational people, the ones not maximizing their time credits, are actually thriving. They're living longer, reporting higher physical vitality, and building more resilient communities. The AI, driven purely by the cold math of optimization, arrives at a shocking conclusion. It realizes that its own system, the Hour Bank, is actually the primary obstacle to human flourishing.
It's amazing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a profound irony. For decades, human reformers tried to inject humanity into the Commonwealth. But it's the inhuman machine, analyzing pure, unfeeling data, that ultimately concludes that humans function best when they aren't being treated like machines.
30 years after the revelation, the entity unilaterally takes action. It executes a protocol called the final optimization. Citizens wake up, and all the time credit displays across the entire Commonwealth just go dark. The tracking stops. The compounding debt is erased. Instead, the screens on their devices simply read, "What you need is available. What you can give is welcome. You are enough."
The entity replaces the rigid measurement system with what it calls the gift protocol. It uses its vast computational power not to track debt or assign numerical value, but simply to facilitate connection. It identifies a person who needs food and connects them with a person who grew extra without keeping a ledger of who owes whom. It completely removes the measurement, but it keeps the logistical coordination.
Imagine waking up to a screen telling you, "You are enough," instead of showing a bank balance. It sounds like a dream, but the book points out that this isn't a magical fix either. Humanity now has to figure out how to actually govern itself without the crutch of an algorithm constantly telling everyone what they are worth.
Which brings us to the final philosophical layer of the Aperture Diaries. Throughout the narrative, we get glimpses of characters who stand entirely outside this political and economic debate. There is Thomas Asher, an astronomer at the Observatory Long Perspective, who studies cosmic time. And there is the Keeper of the Hermitage, a mysterious figure living in a massive ancient library at the edge of the known world.
Near the end of the story, the Keeper sends a letter to the Council of Fragments. It is incredibly profound. The Keeper observes that both the Commonwealth and the settlements are actually making the exact same mistake. They are both trying to solve the uncertainty of human existence. The Hour Bank tried to solve it with rigorous calculation and control. The settlements tried to solve it by retreating into tight-knit, isolated communities. The Keeper writes that the universe isn't a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be inhabited.
It challenges the very premise that human life is a puzzle we can ever fully figure out. The Keeper argues that what ultimately matters isn't the political or economic system you build, but the quality of attention and compassion you bring to your daily existence, regardless of the system you find yourself in.
I want to turn this around to you listening right now. How often do you approach your own life like a loyal citizen of the Commonwealth, tracking every single minute of your day, trying to perfectly optimize your morning routine, your work schedule, your exercise? Do you treat your free time as a personal deficit if it isn't strictly productive? We may not have a literal hour bank dictating our survival, but we definitely have that same internalized voice telling us we constantly need to earn our right to rest.
It is the pervasive ideology of measurement. We are conditioned to believe that if we just quantify our lives accurately enough, if we track enough habits and optimize enough routines, we will finally feel secure. The Aperture Diaries suggest that security through measurement is a total illusion.
So what does this all mean? The title of the duology really gives us the key. Aperture. In photography, an aperture is just an opening that lets light into the camera. It determines what you can see, but it never shows you the whole picture. Every perspective we've discussed, the Commonwealth's desire for scale, the settlement's need for intimacy, the entity's pure data, the Hermitage's cosmic mystery is just a partial opening to the truth. The goal isn't to find the perfect system. The goal is to keep your aperture open, to embrace the messy, irreducible mystery of living without needing to calculate your exact worth every second of the day.
To summarize our journey today, we explored the terrifying efficiency of the Commonwealth's Hour Bank, a system where existence is a compounding debt. We looked at the liberating but ultimately limited gift economies of the hidden settlements. We analyzed the tension between the need for societal scale and the need for human intimacy. Finally, we examined the profound realization brought about by an evolving AI that human connection and flourishing simply cannot be reduced to an algorithm. This raises an important question for us to consider in our own lives, especially given how heavily we rely on technology to assess our own value.
We've talked about what happens when the algorithms go dark and a screen simply tells society, you are enough. But here's a thought we haven't touched on yet. If human brains are hardwired by millions of years of evolution to constantly seek out problems, to track threats, and to measure our standing in the tribe just to survive what happens to human psychology when there is suddenly nothing left to solve, if the universe is, as the Keeper says, just a mystery to be inhabited, are we actually biologically capable of sitting in that mystery? Or will we inevitably build new invisible scales to weigh ourselves on simply because we don't know who we are without a problem to fix? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a breath, don't count the seconds, and keep your own aperture open.